Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, there are just two things you need to know. When I think fine cinema, the first thing that comes to mind are video game adaptations. I'm talking about the classics: Street Fighter, Legend of Chun-Li, Dead or Alive, House of the Dead. Still not convinced? Clearly you've forgotten Tomb Raider. Or how about Lara Croft Tomb Raider? Or what about Lara Croft Tomb Raider: The Cradle of Life? As if it weren't already obvious, video game movies are easily the best of all movies. It's like taking two cool things and combining them into one even cooler thing. Try all you want, but you can't find a single bad thing to say about any of these films, which is why they are the best of all movies. Now, the second thing you need to know is that I'm a liar. Video game movies are notorious for being terrible, and because I still have a vivid memory of hating the Mario Brothers movie as a kid, I consider myself an expert on the subject. But surely it's not all bad, right? There must be at least one video game adaptation that was good. You may hear people say that there is one such film. In my restless dreams, I see that movie. House of the Dead. Nah, just fucking with you. We're obviously talking about Silent Hill. Released in 2006, Silent Hill was an adaptation of the original PlayStation game from 1999. Despite some of the creative choices made by the director and series fan Christoph Gans, the movie is considered one of the better video game adaptations ever made. And now that that same director is currently in pre-production on a new Silent Hill film, I thought it would be a good time to take a look back at the original to see how it holds up. I'm also going to be taking a look at its sequel at some point, but I need to order that one first. Okay, while we wait on that, let's take a look at the first movie and the original game that inspired it. The original Silent Hill game tells the story of Harry Mason, a man traveling to Silent Hill with his adopted daughter, Cheryl. It's been 4 years since the death of Harry's wife, Jody, and a vacation is just the thing they need to help them finally move on. While driving on the outskirts of town, Harry swerves his car to avoid hitting a girl crossing the street, and is knocked unconscious by the resulting car crash. Later, he wakes to find that Cheryl is missing, and their favorite vacation spot is covered in a thick fog and seems to be abandoned. The beginning of the game is pretty close to the movie, but with a few obvious differences. From here, the film continues to move further away from the source material as it goes on. Now, I know what you're thinking. Didn't you say that director Christoph Gans is a big fan of Silent Hill? Surely having a director who is a self-proclaimed fan of the games would mean that we're gonna get an accurate movie adaptation, right?
I was so in love with the game that I really wanted to make it into a movie.
There wouldn't be any silly and unnecessary changes made for no apparent reason, right? So the movie does follow the story of the game in spirit, but it makes some pretty big changes that left fans feeling conflicted. To me, these changes are all unnecessary, and they only really end up pissing fans of the games off and leaving the broader audience bored out of their minds. I'll be focusing on the major changes that I hated the most, but feel free to list off your personal favorites in the comments. The first and most obvious thing fans will notice is that everyone's favorite dad is missing. Apparently, Christoph Gans felt that having a male lead wouldn't have been realistic because Harry is in a very vulnerable state in the game. Audiences just wouldn't believe it if a man was afraid of these stupid CG hell toddlers. It's the same logic behind the final girl trope that we see in old slasher movies, that audiences would have an easier time believing a woman to be fearful and emotional as opposed to a man. The idea that Harry, a father who is desperately looking for his lost child in a nightmare hell world full of unspeakable horrors, wouldn't be believable as a protagonist is some of the dumbest shit I have ever heard. I'm sure Christoph thought he was acting with the fans' best interest in mind though. In addition to sounding like a fun punk rock band, Dahlia and the Cult are are the next big departure from the source material that we're treated to in the film. In the game, Dahlia is the antagonist. She's the leader of the cult that conducted the ritual burning and torture of her own daughter, Alessa. She tricks Harry into defeating Alessa's darkness because she wants to reunite the two halves of Alessa's soul, Cheryl being one of them, who in the movie is named Sharon for some reason, and the dark Alessa being the other. Doing so will birth their god and bring them to paradise. In the movie, this role is instead split between two characters. Dahlia is still ultimately responsible for having her daughter sacrificed, but in the movie she feels really bad about it and is portrayed as more of a sympathetic character than anything. This is to serve some half-baked theme about motherhood or something. It's pretty muddled, to be honest. It definitely doesn't feel developed enough to justify a gender swap of the lead character anyway. The film's antagonist and cult leader is Dahlia's sister, Christabella, a character created just for this movie. The cult's motivations are inexplicably altered from the game as well. Rather than trying to birth their god using Alessa, they're reduced to playing simple religious zealots that want to destroy Alessa and anyone else they deem an outsider to their religion. They are also pretty cringe. You gotta love this guy though. Even after seeing all this shit go down, he remains a true believer and tries to stop Rose from, well, being there, I guess. This cult is just stupid and ridiculous in this movie. Changing these things doesn't make the film bad by itself. It's what they did with them or didn't do that end up hurting the movie. The games give us so many great details about the cult and characters that we should have a plot progression that looks something like this. And instead, we got one that looked more like this. Now, sometimes it's just not possible to faithfully adapt a story from a book or a video game one-to-one. Some things need to be changed or cut entirely in order to fit a 2-hour runtime. We all understand that. So, having a female lead made the movie scarier, and simplifying the cult and demons storyline to be one of revenge made for a more engaging story, right? They created a far more interesting and frightening story with all those changes, right? Right? Silent Hill, more like silent theater. Despite all the changes to the source material, the biggest problem I have with this movie is just how boring and uneventful it is. This is largely due to the main characters being about as exciting as wet bread. One of the best qualities of the games are the memorable characters, and it's a shame that all the characters in this movie are so basic and underdeveloped. The movie just kind of starts with this scene of Rose looking for Sharon, who's about to sleepwalk her way onto the local news. She's been doing the creepy kid thing and drawing pictures of Silent Hill, and for some reason, Rose is convinced that by taking her there, it will cure her sleepwalking. Kind of a generic setup, but okay. Inevitably, this causes a rift between her and her husband, who thinks they should just, take her to a doctor or something, but we don't really get to see any of that develop. The movie gets us to Silent Hill in less than 15 minutes, which I guess is okay to do in your Silent Hill movie, but outside of Sharon's origins, we don't learn anything about our characters throughout the 2-hour runtime of this film. We never really get any great character moments to connect with, and I wish that we could have had more time before Silent Hill to establish our characters. Or maybe if they beefed up the friendship between Sybil and Rose during the Silent Hill stuff, I would have been more on board. Just give me someone to care about, because as it is, I do not care about. So, Rose's motivation through the movie is simply to help and eventually save her daughter. The plot relies on her to make some really dumb decisions in order to get the story moving, so she kind of ends up coming off as a dumbass. Why did she decide to run from the police? She hadn't committed a crime, and her daughter sleepwalks. It's not like she's bleeding out in the back seat, and the only thing that can stop it is a heaping dose of Silent Hill. By the way, she has no idea if taking her to Silent Hill is going to do anything. Why put your kid in actual danger by involving her in a high-speed pursuit with the police? Initially I thought maybe Sybil was kind of a terrible cop for suspecting Rose for no real reason, but it turns out that she was right all along. This lady is clearly crazy, and this child is in danger under her care. Sybil still manages to win dumbest character in the movie though when she decided to do this. What is she, Barney Fife? Why would anyone clue their attackers in on the fact that your gun is empty and then smile about it like you got one over on them? Sick burn, Sybil. Most of the movie follows Rose as she wanders around aimlessly in Silent Hill, discovering clues Alessa has left for her. There aren't a lot of clues to be found, but boy, do we spend a lot of time wandering around looking for them. Now, on one hand, I kind of appreciate some of this, at least in theory. In addition to establishing the atmosphere of Silent Hill, it's pretty close to how the games work, and it should serve as a clever way to move the story along. Instead, it doesn't. It's mostly the script that makes all these moments fall flat, but the problem also lies in the execution. For example, when Rose gets a clue from this sex pervert's mouth, it's a tense moment. We don't really know why she's reaching into his mouth, except for the fact that a demon dared her to do it, but we're wondering if he's going to jump to life as soon as she gets too close. Of course, nothing happens, and Rose pulls something out of his mouth before immediately running away. She doesn't even look at it. We, the audience, don't get to look at it. We're just left wondering, wait, what was that? Did she get a key or something? Hey, what happened? Before we can come up with any answers, the monster man comes to life and slowly crawls towards our hero, menacingly. After this, we see our favorite out-of-place Silent Hill 2 monster for the first time, and we stop thinking about the clues so much. Of course, after this crazy horror sequence, we find out that the clue was telling Rose to investigate the hotel next. I guess she found the time to look at it off-screen, but wouldn't it have been nice to be clued in with our lead character? If the clues had left both Rose and the audience towards a solution or some concrete information, it would have been a pretty fun and engaging way to tell your story. Instead of revealing information relative to her current situation, we just get meaningless flashes of Alessa's backstory presented without context. It's never really engaging the viewer in solving the mystery themselves, which is why it starts to feel so boring. Well, that and the mystery itself isn't really that mysterious. Basically, a little girl was abused and then burned alive by some crazy zealots. Got it. Did we really need to string the audience along for an hour and a half to get that across? If they had kept the original story where the cult intends on using Alessa to birth a god that will end the world or whatever, then I could see how small clues with just enough context could be really engaging. You may not know exactly where it's going, and it could be exciting to find out. But here it's just too simple, and then at the end when we get that 10 minutes of the demon explaining it all anyway, you're left wondering why the demon didn't just do that to begin with. By that point, we pretty much know where it was going, and it feels really lazy to just dump all the remaining exposition at the end. It also makes Alessa's revenge in the finale feel kind of underwhelming since we just learned about it a minute ago. Speaking of Alessa, let's go ahead and talk about So the entire reason she's leading Rose through Silent Hill is to Trojan horse her way into the church so she can kill the purple lady, right? So why put her in so much danger? It was already stupid that this movie had the sexy nurses from Silent Hill 2, more on that later, but why have them guarding your hideout? Rose could have died right here, and then what? I guess you'd have to lure Sean Bean in next? I don't know. I mean, I get that the movie would be too boring if Rose was never in danger, but it makes no sense for Alessa, who apparently controls the monsters, to attack Rose. If her entire reason for bringing her to Silent Hill was to help her get revenge on the church. Normally, I'm not the type to pick a movie's logic apart like this unless I am bored, and unfortunately that was the case when rewatching Silent Hill. Like when Christabella finally leaves the church to show Rose where the demon lives. Why didn't the demon just make Pyramid Head show up and tear her skin off or something? Why go through all the trouble of getting Rose to help you in the church when the big bad was out here in the open? And why didn't she just merge into Dahlia? Could she not have done that and gone into the church even for a second to help Alessa out? You don't make any sense. Still, nothing in this movie is as lame as Christopher. The movie feels especially boring whenever Sean Bean's scenes are happening. Originally, his character was only in the beginning and end of the movie, but when the studio read the script, they found the lack of a male presence in the story unacceptable and forced a rewrite to add more scenes for his character. This makes that decision to gender swap the protagonist kind of stupid in hindsight, don't you think? Sean Bean was coming off the Lord of the Rings trilogy after all, and giving him a larger role would be a great way to draw audiences into theaters. This added about 13 minutes of fluff to the runtime, which didn't do the pacing any favors at all. His search for Rose doesn't really add anything to the story, and it just ends up revealing information that we found out from Rose or Alessa anyway. In a movie full of wheel spinning, his scenes find a way to one-up them all. Watching his character deliberately waste our time is part of what makes this movie feel so dull. I would have much rather seen Sean Bean as Harry looking for Cheryl in Silent Hill. And that's nothing against Radha Mitchell. I think she did an admirable job with what little she was given. I just prefer the story and characters of the game to these cardboard cutouts that we got here. But as many problems as I have with this movie, there are still some things that I do appreciate about it. Well, the one thing the movie got right were the creatures and the music. They were great. Well, yes and no. Except for those terrible CG toddlers at the start, the weird bugs, and the cringe lord demon stuff at the end, the monsters were all done using practical effects for the most part. The creatures do look good and I can't fault them there. It's actually one of my favorite things about the movie. I also kind of hate it at the same time. The problem is that they're all missing context. The monsters in Silent Hill games are often just as, if not more interesting than the characters themselves, often serving as a dark reflection of our protagonist or at least having some deeper symbolic meaning behind their strange appearances. Perhaps the best examples of that are found in Silent Hill 2, which is what this movie takes inspiration from with a lot of its creatures. I won't spoil anything about Silent Hill 2 because its story is actually pretty incredible, but just know that this guy shouldn't fucking be here. He looks great, sure, but the creator should have known that the lack of context behind his appearance is enough to turn the fans on you. Now, it's not as bad as Nemesis in the Resident Evil movie, but that doesn't make it good either. The same can be said of the nurses. It's really cool that they had professional dancers play the nurses. It makes their movement feel bizarre and creepy just like the games. And even though this scene makes no sense in the movie, it's at least an attempt at a suspenseful horror type scene, which the movie is sorely lacking throughout in my opinion. The main problem for me again is that they use the design of the Silent Hill 2 nurse, which has a deeper meaning behind it besides just, boobies. Or maybe that is the meaning, actually, but the way it relates to our main character in the film is certainly different than its meaning in the game. At any rate, for Silent Hill fans, the inclusion of these specific designs can feel like the movie is just jangling some keys in front of you, like you're some dumb baby. I felt the same way about the inclusion of the original music from composer Akira Yamaoka. Some of the songs have a deeper meaning to them, and hearing them outside of that context can be a little weird, but mostly I think it works better than the monsters did. It's just a shame that they played Promise about a dozen times throughout the movie. Like, okay, we get it. You use the original music. Cool. But is it really appropriate to keep using this song for every clue Rose finds? The song's name is a reference to the promise James made to his wife Mary in Silent Hill 2. And every time I hear it, I can't help but think of that much better storyline while this song is being used to service this hacky one. I guess it's not all bad though. There are some amazing sets, and overall the production design for this movie is really great.
We basically have created the entire town of Silent Hill, which is completely deserted, covered in ash, and occasionally consumed by the most malevolent spirits imaginable.
It's been such a gift. We actually have this wonderful atmosphere and these sets that just really set the stage for us to play.
And just to create the texture. I have a passion for movies with texture, and texture just comes with the aging of sets. So I like sets that can have some age and also some history to them.
The cinematography by Dan Lauston is greatly appreciated, and it's easily the best thing about the film for me. There's great use of darkness and shadows. Smoke and rain are often added to give more texture to the picture, which is not something that just happens by accident. All of this effort helps establish the mood of Silent Hill, and they even recreate some of the camera angles from the game. Though I think they kind of abandoned that after the first sequence of Rose looking for Sharon, but it's still cool. After that, the camera movements get a little less creative. We get some pretty basic panning left or right with some stuff in the foreground. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's kind of a nitpick. It's a pretty basic technique for adding depth to your image, but they use it so much it stood out to me. There's also some questionable shots and edits throughout that kind of take me out of the moody atmospheric stuff, but overall this movie looks great. It really feels like Silent Hill at times. But no matter how good a movie looks, story is always king. And unfortunately, this movie and its audience suffer from its lack of one. I can't say I totally hated my rewatch of Silent Hill. I remember liking this movie when I was younger, renting it from Blockbuster a couple of times. There are still parts of it I really appreciate, and compared to the Resident Evil movies, it's hard to be too critical of it. But looking at this movie now, I can't help but notice what a snore it is. All you're really left with while watching Silent Hill are the pretty sets, costumes, and creatures. The music is nice too, but after a while it just feels like a cheap trick to make fans happy. It may get close to capturing the mood and look of Silent Hill with its stellar design and cinematography, but no matter how good it looks, it's not enough to distract from its anemic story and characters. The film is just not very fun to rewatch. But sad as it may be, it still manages to stand as one of the better video game movies we've ever seen. Sometimes because of the misplaced nods to the game, but mostly because of that rich cinematography and look of the film. You really get the sense that you're in a Silent Hill game, and I guess that's kind of the goal. But if you look at it apart from other video game adaptations, it really can't stand on its own as a movie. But it's still not nearly as bad as that sequel. Oh hey, speak of the devil, it says it should be here today. In fact, I think that's the FedEx truck outside right now.
Silent Hill. Silent Hill. Silent